Okay, man, are you ready to go?
I'm ready to go. Now, come on, now crank this motherfucker up.
Break it down like this.
Hello, Internet. Gino, that Pinguino Greco here again with another episode of Deep Listens. Today we're going to be discussing Maniac Mansion, Day of the Tentacle. The kind of one of the seminal games made by Tim Schafer, one of the most well-regarded old-school adventure games. It had been a long time that I had heard about this game, and I figured, hey, I have a podcast where we play random games every once in a while. Let's try this one that I've heard about my entire life. So, with that in mind, I am joined, as always, by Pete Busby.
Hey, what's going on? A game, I'm not sure if we've played a point and click at all. If we have, it's been a while. So
I have,
nice
but
change.
you, I don't think, have. I've played the Pajama Sam games, Myst and Riven for the podcast, but I did not inflict any of that on anyone else.
Excellent. A generous man, as always, Gino.
Yeah.
But week's fun fact for the podcast. This one's pretty simple compared to last week's, bacteria that doesn't breathe, but it really struck me. So apparently some whales, the fat content in the milk they produce is so high, it has the consistency of toothpaste.
Ugh.
Yeah. So like a little baby whale gets toothpaste milk. Yep.
Well, they
enjoys that.
They do have to get fattened up very quickly, I suppose.
Yeah, they do. It's necessary, but it sounds super gross.
Gross, but necessary.
Yeah, this is probably why we don't drink whale milk.
Damn it, now that you've said this, someone's gotten the idea to go get whale milk.
Apparently camel milk's been popping off. I've been
Really?
seeing ads left and right. And like, it's early enough that they can make claims like, I've seen this in multiple places that people are claiming camel milk cures autism.
What?
Which is just, it's just a horribly reprehensible thing to do. But as if like all of medical science is just like, yeah, we know about it. We just we didn't mention it. Whatever.
Damn.
Yeah.
It turns out, this milk of this common animal that's existed for centuries, that was the cure.
That was it. We just never bothered to check.
Penguin milk, turns out. That's
Platypus milk. Platypus probably will cure something.
They probably have milk.
It's got
they
to.
do. Yeah.
They're mammals.
Oh, they do.
Trust me.
And that other voice you hear is M. Palladino.
Hello, everyone. I'm going back through my Games 101 notes for adventure games, and I see Maniac Mansion and Day of the Tentacle on here. There's not a lot of stuff, but I did take notes on it once, so I guess that validates its place in history, because it was taught at NYU Game Center.
It's canonical.
Yeah, it's in the lineup, right behind Zork and Mystery House and King's Quest. There it is. Maniac Mansion. A classic.
Yes. And before we start discussing Day of the Tentacle, a couple of pieces of housekeeping. First off, the Giant Bomb Community Endurance Run is rapidly approaching. If you listened to last week's podcasts, you heard about some of the events that are going to be coming up from April 17th to 19th. This is our annual fundraiser that I organize as one of the moderators on GiantBomb.com, a video game website. And the fundraiser raises money for Pencils of Promise, a charity that builds schools, trains teachers, and sends kids to school in developing nations. This year we are trying to raise $15,000 for charity, and the idea there is that it costs $1,500 to set up a school with clean drinking water and hygiene training for the students for a year. And given the current state of the world, hygiene training, hand washing training, more important than ever. And honestly, it's a bit of a funny thing, but when on the news they were talking about how you can properly wash your hands, how to properly do it, like the 20 seconds, and there's all these bits of your hand that you're never really washing between the fingies, the thumb, underneath the nails. I actually had watched some Pencils of Promise content on their wash program and learned how to properly wash my hands. So that's why I've been washing my hands properly. It was not news to me because this charity does good work. So $1,500 sponsors a school's wash program for a year. That $15,000 will be enough for 10 schools. So that's what we're trying to do. I'm personally trying to raise $3,000. So you can go to the Giant Bomb Community Endurance Run 10 donation page, which should be, I believe, pencilsofpromise.org/ let me make sure this works, GBCERX. Yep. If you just go fundraise.pencilsofpromise.org/GBCERX, that'll take you to the team page, and then you can find each of the team members, you can donate to each of us, and we will have donation incentives and things coming up. But if you can, please do. Other housekeeping. We have emails. You can get in touch with the show, deeplistenspod, at deeplistenspod on Twitter. deeplistens.libsyn.com. We've got comment sections, and deeplistenspodcast@gmail.com. No comments today, but you can reach out to us there, and you can also support the show, patreon.com/deeplistens, and you might be on the Discord report.
The Discord report. This week on the Discord report, we are going to be playing Dungeon World. Some of you might know this is a tabletop role-playing game. It is going to be, I think, 4 of us, and our very own Jeff Rude, I believe, is going to be running it.
You may know from the Final Fantasy V podcast, and Final Fantasy 1, 2, and 5. Jeff was on all those.
Yep. We may be recording it, but we might be putting that out pretty soon.
Yeah, so that just happened organically. People on the Discord were like, "Hey, everyone's locked in their homes. Want to do some some role playing stuff?" And we're like, "Sure."
We figured we'd start off with a simpler system before we got into like Pathfinder. I don't know how much we could handle all those numbers.
So many numbers.
Yeah. So, yeah, we'll be starting that, I believe, on Wednesday. We might have an episode, like, maybe by next week. We'll see. Yeah, I gotta talk to you at the end of the show about what we used to record this.
Yes. So we'll do that, and we've also had just ongoing discussions of game nights and things because people have a lot more time now. So we'll probably get a game night going. We need to do a salmon run. We need to get some Animal Crossing towns together. We'll figure some stuff out, some community stuff. So
have you started Animal Crossing? Have you crossed your animals?
I have crossed animals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's your fruit?
Speaking of which, it's time to talk about my obsession this week.
I see.
And you know what my obsession is? It's Animal Crossing. I acquired Animal Crossing because the New York tri-state area is almost like New York itself is going to be under shelter in place for the foreseeable future, and the whole tri-state area is basically shutting down. So COVID-19 is what?
What's the tri-state area for New York? Jersey, Connecticut?
Jersey, Connecticut. Basically, the whole 95 corridor.
Gotcha. Oh, yeah. I mean, PA is pretty much done too. But
yeah, like the whole 95 corridor, but like you can get from Connecticut to Jersey in like an hour. So all of those, basically everything that funnels into New York City. If you have a train line that goes straight into New York City, you count as the tri-state area.
Gotcha.
So that whole area has basically been getting shut down. So I wanted to get some games that were not just playable by me, but also easily shareable because my significant other does not enjoy video games and on the, the lot higher. Usually she does not enjoy them, especially ones that are especially violent or competitive or boring, like, long storytelling games. She'll usually shy away from too because she's like, I could just read a book that's written way better than this, which, fair. Totally fair. But Animal Crossing, with its simplicity and its just kind of general upbeat, jovial attitude, is just the sort of thing that we can both kind of vibe with. She doesn't have to pay close attention to it because the moment-to-moment action in Animal Crossing is not the point, and I can sink as much time into it as I want because Animal Crossing asks nothing of you, but it will reward you all the same. So yeah, my island, my town is, I guess it's an island. My island is Cactuar Island.
Nice.
I have cherries.
Me too.
Yeah. Go cherries. My two, I guess, foundational members on the island are Coach, who is a goat who's way into exercise, and Diva, who is a frog, a purple frog, who's a little uptight and gossipy. What about you, Em?
I have Billy, who is also a goat
Huh.
and also into sports, and Katie, it's a cat, and she is usually in her house. I haven't seen her much outside.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I usually play later, so it could be partially that. Like, they don't come out at night. Yeah, I'm having fun. I've been fishing a lot. I got the museum up and running.
I can donate to the museum, but the museum doesn't exist yet. It's just a tent.
Mm-hmm.
I need to build the shop and the tent and the museum.
Get on that.
Yeah. How do you get a lot of iron ore?
So, the way that I did it, if you go to Nook's shop and you get a ticket, you can take that to the airport and then take it to an uninhabited island. And then they have like 3 to 4 rocks that you can hit for iron ore.
Oh, so you just go to an uninhabited island and you get more resources than if you just stay on your own island?
Pretty much, yeah. Otherwise you're waiting like a day or I don't know how many you can get at once.
Okay. All right. So right now I've just been on my island. I just got access to a pole vault pole. I don't have access to ladders yet. I don't have access, like, I'm still using flimsy tools. So I'm a little behind the curve.
Mm-hmm.
It's been fun. Like, Animal Crossing still super good time, still very low impact. I like the whole Nook Miles system. It's fun.
Yeah, it's nice.
Pete, do you have any familiarity with Animal Crossing? Do you play the games or have you played them?
No, honestly, that's never really like a genre that particularly appealed to me. So I've never really gotten that into it.
You've never tried menacing your fellow townsfolk with axes?
No, there's just something about like, I don't know, the community building that I don't dislike it. It just, I don't know, there was other stuff to play, you know?
That's fair. Like, Animal Crossing is low impact. It's low ceiling, or high floor, I would say. Like, if you're just in for, hey, I'm going to go Friday night and here's KK Slider's concert, that's good enough for me. That's so cool. That's kind of Animal Crossing. That's the height of Animal Crossing, right? When you see KK Sliders show up.
Exactly. I found this post the other day that was like, people who've never played Animal Crossing are like, so what do you do? Bro, nothing. We're literally just vibing. I caught a fish, then sat on a tree stump. I'm on cloud 9 over here.
Yep.
Like, that's it. That's the whole thing.
I caught a football fish.
Nice. I have not.
Ooh, you got to get on that. They're going to be gone by the end of March.
Ooh. I don't know when they spawn.
Nighttime in the ocean. It's a lanternfish looking thing.
Oh, that's neat.
I caught 2 of them, and one of them I sold for like 2,000 bells.
Wow. You get attacked by any tarantulas?
I got fucking attacked by a tarantula. It knocked me unconscious.
Yeah. It sucks.
It sucked
Those
a
things
lot.
are mean.
I was like, oh man, I wish I had a net, and then before I could even figure out what happened, it bit me. Pete, this game, your island is basically Australia.
It sounds like chaos. I mean, if you're getting knocked unconscious by tarantulas, it's just a mess.
They say it was because you were terrified, but I know that it bit me.
It did.
All right, without further ado, let's discuss Maniac Mansion, Day of the Tentacle. So, Em, why don't you tell me, you studied this game. What's the deal with Maniac Mansion, Day of the Tentacle?
So, Day of the Tentacle remastered is what I played. I do not see Maniac Mansion on here, but I trust you. It is a adventure game, point and click adventure game. You are playing as 3 different characters who, through zany antics, have ended up in 3 different time periods as they are trying to save the world from a mutant purple tentacle. One of them is in the past, in colonial times, hanging out with Thomas Jefferson and George Washington. One of you is in the present, dealing with the mad scientist who sent you all back in time, trying to get a diamond.
Dr. Fred.
And Dr. Fred,
Dr. Fred Edison.
Treat. And one of you is in the future, where the world is run by tentacles.
Because things went bad.
Yeah, things went poorly, and that is the future you are trying to prevent, so you don't have humans in human shows, which is a plot point.
Yeah. So you play as Bernard, Hoagie, and Laverne.
Mm-hmm.
These names are great. Bernard is a bookish nerd, Hoagie is a roadie, and Laverne is a med school student. And all of them are going to a nearby college, but they get a message from Green Tentacle, who is a separate tentacle from Purple Tentacle, saying that Purple Tentacle was exposed to radioactive goo that gave it both maniacal intent and arms. It was originally just a tentacle, but now that it has...
The arms were keyed with rise.
Yes. Once it gained access to arms, it could not be stopped. Though it does not have thumbs, the arms were enough.
I believe it was always evil, but the arms definitely helped its rise to power.
Yes, and once it gained arms, they basically said, we need to go back in time and stop this science factory from just creating terrible toxic waste, because that's the only way to stop this thing once it has arms. We can't try to stop this purple tentacle with arms. We humans, we would stand no chance. We need to go back in time and prevent it from ever getting arms, or else we're fucked.
Once again, our hubris in creating this monster has been our downfall.
Yeah. So the 3 characters show up at the mansion, the Maniac Mansion, and you run into this event happening. You get the letter, and then you kind of get spun out into different time periods. So it's a point-and-click adventure game with I think it is the Scum engine, is what it's called.
Script creation utility for Maniac Mansion. Developed by Lucasfilm Games in 1987, which became LucasArts, as you might be familiar with. If you played any adventure games in the mid-90s, Secret of Monkey Island, this is what they made all their games with, basically.
Yeah, so the Scum engine you can recognize by its verb system, basically.
Mm-hmm.
There's, at the bottom of the screen, if you were playing in the classic view, there'll be a list of verbs like give, pick up, use, open, look at, push, pull, talk to, and close. And those verbs can be applied to all of the items you see, all of the objects you can interact with. So part of the fun of the game is kind of trying out each of these verbs on everything you can click on. And the characters will generally tell you if you can't if the verb doesn't work, they'll just feel like, that's a dumb thing to do.
For them to say, like, that's a dumb thing to do, like, there are so many dumb things that you need to do in order to solve multiple puzzles. Like, how could you possibly know?
Yeah. So One of the other kind of tried and true elements of adventure games at this time is adventure game logic, where sometimes the solution to a puzzle is an in-joke or a joke that the developers came up with. And so you have to kind of get into the mind of the developer of what they thought the funny joke would be, and not necessarily where logic would carry you. Like, there are some puzzles in this game that I think are very clever and intuitive. Like, one of the big ones is Fred Edison says you need oil, vinegar, and gold. I think.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, you need those three things to make a super battery that's going to allow Hoagie to power his time machine, because there are multiple time machines in this game that need powering. And Hoagie, being in the past, he needs access to those three things. So one of them is oil. You can just find that lying around. Then you see a gold-plated quill, and that's clearly the thing that you need to get gold from. So you go through a series of puzzles to get that gold. But then there's also vinegar, and the way to get vinegar is there's a time capsule that you get access to, and you find wine. So if you give Thomas Jefferson wine, he will put it in the time capsule, and then by the time you go to the future, it's vinegar. So it's interesting to see like the time travel-y elements play out. But some of the puzzles, I think, just ask you to try out a whole bunch of random nonsense and hope that it works.
It's also worth mentioning that you can pass these items through the time machine to time periods.
The Chronojon.
Yeah. It is a porta potty that is a time machine. And like there are certain things you can't pass through, which are like liquids, because it's a porta potty, and I guess the liquids would just disperse.
Except for paint. You can pass paint.
Yeah, paint's odd. I guess you can seal the paint. I don't know.
Yeah, if it's in the can, maybe.
Yeah, and living creatures cannot be passed through time. But there are other ways around that, as we will probably go over.
Yes. So, what was the puzzle that stumped you? Like, did you...
Geez.
I guess the first question is, like, did you use a guide at any point for this game?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of had to at a certain point. Like, eventually, just the time constraints of our, release structure compelled me to.
There was, I believe it was the crowbar that was holding me back the most. Because in order to get the crowbar, you needed to get keys. And the keys were in the stupidest place. They were in the door to one of the rooms that, in order to get into the room, you had to open the door. And if I did not look at the guide, I would never have found those keys. I was like flipping through the guide because I didn't want to spoil too much. But I was like, how do I get... I see I have the crowbar here. How do I get the crowbar from this guy who's trying to break into a car? Somehow he gave him keys. I was like flipping through, and then it was just like, open the door, take keys. I was like, God damn it.
You know what one got me is sort of a similar one. It took longer than it should have. I'll put it that way. So you have to find the plans for the super battery to send a Hoagie back into the past, and they're just posted on the bulletin board on the to-do list. Because Dr. Edison's like, oh, I need to do that in the future. And like, for whatever reason, I mean, it never even occurred to me. I was like, where are these fucking plans? I'm like, oh, they're just on the to-do board, because he has to do that.
Yeah, and this game definitely has adventure game kleptomania. You just need to, anything that isn't bolted to the floor, you have to take it. And almost all of it is important. So you have to just like constantly be messing around with all of these objects. Like I took a help wanted sign, and I wasn't even thinking about taking it, but I saw that it was clickable, and I actually clicked on it outside of the window to Maniac Mansion. And Bernard was like, there's a window in the way, can't grab it. So then I went in, I'm like, oh, but you said can't grab it because there's a window, not because you wouldn't want to steal it.
Clearly the stealing's fine. I just
Yeah.
need the opportunity.
So
Yeah.
I walked inside, and then he just took the help wanted sign. I was like, well, what the hell am I going to use a help wanted sign for? And eventually you have to send that one into the past so that Hoagie can get a job working for Dr. Fred's ancestor. Like, he won't give you the job unless you have a help wanted sign.
One of my favorite things is actually the achievements of this game. It's like, if you pick up 15 things that don't belong to you, you're a thief. If you pick up 30 things that don't belong to you, you're a kleptomaniac. If you pick up 45 things, you must be an adventure gamer. I think that's... Yeah,
Yep.
You got me.
They know their audience.
Yeah, I don't know, but you can't beat the game without stealing a bunch of shit.
No, you need to steal everything.
Yeah,
Pretty much.
pretty much. The only puzzle that I don't think has any relevance to the outcome of the game is, did either of you get the left-handed hammer?
Yes, I couldn't
Yes.
figure out what to do with that once I got it.
Oh, so you can go talk to the sons of not Dr. Fred, his ancestor. Ned Edison? No, Ned's the kid.
Ned and Jed are the twins.
Oh, the twins.
There's Weird Ed. I think that's who we're talking about.
Fred is the current time period.
Yeah, I think it's
Yeah.
Weird Ed Edison. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so the colonial days, Doctor, his two sons want to be artists. They don't want to be scientists. And so I thought, oh, maybe I need to like make them fail at art so that they'll become scientists. And one of them's left-handed, one of them's right-handed. So you can distract the one who's sculpting and replace his right-handed hammer with a left-handed hammer. And then he fucks up when he tries to sculpt his brother. And it causes him to have a crisis of confidence. And then in the future, originally he becomes an artist, and his brother, I guess, becomes a scientist. But then you can swap which one ends up becoming the scientist in the family. But there's no outcome. Like, it doesn't change anything. It just changes a statue in the present time.
Right.
See, I assumed because like it flips the statue's arms that you needed that in order to like push the person watching the monitors out the door.
Right.
Oh, is that what? Because
I don't know. Can you push
Huh.
them without switching the statue?
I didn't.
That was another thing that I didn't understand until I saw it in the guide, and I was like, God damn it! You just gotta push her.
Yeah, I kept trying to find different ways to move that woman out of the way.
Mhm.
And it's just like, nah, you just push her. Kept trying to distract her because she flirts with you.
Well, Em, if you got it done, then you must not need to switch the statue. If you could just
Well,
show-
I did switch the statue.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I just wasn't sure what to do with the hammer once I got it.
Oh, yeah, you can get the right-handed hammer. And then once you get the right-handed hammer, you may or may not. I thought maybe I need to use the right-handed hammer for something. Nope, totally don't.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Where did you usually keep your items, by the way? Because I found, like, I spent the longest time walking back to the Chronojon every time I needed to send something, and then I realized you could just do it from the menu by dragging the item to the person you want to send it to.
What?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I wasn't
just put it over
sure.
their icon.
Does it show up in their inventory, or do you have to pass it?
No, it just shows
They
up
just edit.
right,
Yeah.
where they are.
Is that a remastered feature?
I don't know. I think that's just a thing you can do. That's
Fuck.
just, yeah. I was going to ask if you realize that, but I guess not.
I tried to architect my movements so that I had to make the fewest number of trips to the Chronojon as possible.
Oh, no.
But that means that, like, when you're Laverne and you're trapped in the cell
Mhm.
at the very beginning, you're supposed to trick one of the tentacles to let you go to the Chronojon.
Yes.
I assumed that was the only way that you could get items to Laverne in the future.
No, she can just get them.
Guess not.
Yeah.
Fuck. Took so much time.
once I realized that I was just sending items, like, I would keep my inventory on one character and just pass it around every time I wanted to try some things.
Yep.
Yeah.
Just in case this is the one thing I needed now. You can have everything.
Yep. There are like 3 things you can't pass.
That was part of why I used the guide, was because I thought, well, crap, I don't want to have to waste all this time passing one item at a time through the chronogon, because the act of passing it through the chronogon is like
forever.
One person passes one thing, then you jump to the other person, and they take it out, then you jump back to the first person, and it's just an arduous, annoying process. Fuck. That's so much better.
I'm so sorry you subjected yourself to that.
I use the internal logic of the game. You have to pass it through the toilet. Ugh.
The one time you didn't have to do that. Well,
I mean, the internal logic of adventure games is, pretty mutable anyway. It's more of a suggestion than anything else.
So what did you think was the funniest puzzle? Like the puzzle that actually made you... Did any of these puzzles actually make you laugh?
I liked the sweater one.
yeah.
So like through a long sort of convoluted process, you get a very cold hamster and you have to warm it up. So the solution is to go to the past, put a sweater in the dryer with just a ton of quarters, and then in the future when they finally take it out, it's hamster size.
Oh man. I played the game using the developer's commentary where you could hit like the A button and it would just say some stuff from the actual people who worked on the game. They said they actually did the math for how many quarters it would take to keep a sweater in the laundry for 200 years. So if you click on the item like stacks and stacks of quarters, it says something like, this is 800,000 quarters, some very specific number. And they were like, yep, we did that because if we didn't, someone on the internet would definitely call us out.
They would do the math and then we'd look stupid.
Exactly.
That's the sort of attention to detail you need for games like this. I'm surprised nobody did like the tensile strength of wool too. Well, like, here's the exact amount of time it would take to shrink it to hamster size.
Yeah, Bernard's puzzles really fucked with me because a bunch of them were just him being mean-spirited and shitty.
I think so.
With his invisible ink.
Yeah.
Yeah, the invisible ink one fucking threw me because I was like, I thought invisible ink, well, I've got to use this on the Declaration of Independence, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or the Constitution. Like, that's what you do, right? I tried to use replace the ink with invisible ink because, hilarious. Hijinks. But it turns out what you need to use the invisible ink for is throwing it on Weird Ed Edison's book of stamps so that he throws you out of his room, throws a stamp book at your face, and you get a stamp that falls out of the stamp book.
I don't understand why the invisible ink, when you spray it on a person, goes away, and when it's sprayed on the stamp book, it stays. Do you understand the composition?
It goes away on the stamp book eventually. Because you can return it. And he's like, oh, I guess things are fine then.
I guess we're cool.
I guess that was a joke. Ha ha ha. It was very funny how you made me very mad and feel as though I was going to lose years of therapy.
There's also an achievement you can get for spraying the invisible ink on everybody.
Yeah, I was doing that.
Yeah, it's like joke never gets old or something.
Yeah.
I didn't spray the invisible ink on anyone. I just was trying to figure out what the hell to do with it. And, like, Weird Ed Edison, I think if you give him back the book, he's like, why would you do that? Like, you knew how much this meant to me.
What is your problem?
Yeah, basically. And Bernard says, sometimes I do stuff, and I don't even know why. It's as if my body was controlled by a demonic, sadistic puppet master.
Yep.
And that was honestly my favorite joke in the whole game.
Good.
Like, sometimes I just do mean shit. Like, Another good one is like pushing Dr. Fred's wife out of
Yeah.
the room. And Bernard's like, look, sometimes to save the future, you have to push a few old ladies down the stairs.
Do you see her after that?
No,
Yeah,
she's gone.
She's gone.
She dead.
She's murdered. It's alright, we have a time machine. It'll sort itself
Yeah.
out.
Oh, she'll be
Yeah,
fine.
like, what would make you think that you need to freeze the hamster? You get a hamster, and for me, I was just like, I was reading a guide, and it's like, yeah, throw the hamster in the icebox. I'm like, why would I
ever think of
why would I
that?
do that?
Can we talk about the moment where you warm the hamster up too?
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Oh, okay, so
you put the hamster in the microwave to warm it up, and the game goes through like so many layers of disclaimers. That, like, look, don't do this. This won't work for you. This only works for us in the future. Don't
Do
try
not
this.
do this at home.
So the reason they do that is because I think in Maniac Mansion 1, that's a way to lose, is you put Ed's hamster in the microwave and then he kills you.
No, that just like ends it.
Oh,
Yeah.
Shit.
So it's a callback to Maniac Mansion 1. And that's what, when you first talk to Ed, he says, like, I don't remember. I remember I was very mad. I remember a ding, 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 and then a pop sound. I think it involved the microwave. But now I'm better after therapy.
What's his deal in the first game? He's like a conspiracy nut?
Apparently, he's some sort of...
It's like a military conspiracy thing?
Yes. For Dr. Friend's son, who is concerned for his father and what he's doing in the basement of their mansion. Yeah, we could play it. Yeah. Yeah, you can put Ed's pet hamster in the microwave, and that's a lost condition in the original game. So
Good.
they did a callback in this game.
I mean, you should lose if you microwave a hamster.
yeah.
And they threaten, just as the hamster's being reheated, they constantly threaten, like, the eyes are bulging, the head's bulging, and then it comes out okay. You have to turn your wet, soggy hamster into a dry, wet hamster.
Then he goes through the vacuum. The hamster has a tough time in this one.
Yeah.
It does. But it helps save the world.
You know who else they make look like a jerk, too? Is Ben Franklin.
Oh, yeah.
Like, he's just
really
sort of
mean.
like this... Yeah, he's like an oafish buffoon.
I mean, John Hancock has it even worse.
It's true.
He's a chattering idiot. I love that him, Thomas Jefferson, and George Washington are hanging out. Hancock's in, like, a gigantic blanket because he's cold, and Thomas Jefferson won't light a fire in their main room because he's going to put the log into a time capsule as, like, the perfect log.
Yes.
And so he can't warm this guy up.
This isn't like a great lesson on U.S. history. Like,
No.
No.
and then,
I did like giving George Washington an exploding cigar, and that being how he loses his teeth.
And then there's Betsy Ross, like, just toiling up as just like this unappreciated, like, servant, just constantly making new flag designs.
And then Hoagie comes in and is like, what if we put skulls on it? What if there was a eagle and it was metal? She was like, just put the plans over there. God damn it.
You've rejected the last 6 designs. You chuckleheads. Hoagie, I think... So which of the main characters did you enjoy the most?
Probably Hoagie.
Probably, yeah. I mean, he's probably the best one.
I liked Laverne's general oddness.
I just
She's
like how she
weird.
moves, too. Like, she has this very, like, weird sort of side-to-side, like, shuffling gait.
She kind of like extends her arms and then like bounces like over to where you put her. She's a character. They're all very like 90s cartoon characters.
Yes. I especially... Laverne endeared herself to me immediately because her initial item in her inventory is a scalpel because she's a med student. And I was like, well, I've got a scalpel and I'm trapped in this cell. How do I get out of this cell? All I've got's a scalpel. And I tried talking to my cellmates, and none of them would talk to me, and I tried taking cards. They were playing cards. I tried to take them, and she wouldn't take them. And I was like, use Scalpel on cellmates. And she was just like, I don't want to kill my cellmates yet.
Yeah.
They've given me no reason to kill them so far. And she was like, she wasn't ruling it out.
Leaving her options open.
Yeah. If you try it on other people, she's like, me and my therapist have an agreement.
Yeah. She's the best.
Hoagie was good too, because if you stand around long enough, he'll actually eat a hoagie.
Yeah.
And you get an achievement that says it's basically cannibalism.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think that like some of the time travel puzzles are clever. Like some of them involve time travel. Other puzzles are just, hey, you got this item here, send it there. And I found those puzzles a little bit more annoying, like getting the help wanted sign from the present, sending it to the past, getting the scalpel from the future and sending it to the present. It's just like, hey, in the present, there's a bunch of sharp objects I've got. Can I use any of them to pop this clown? No. You need the scalpel. Well, I have a fork that's probably sharp enough. Nope. Can't do it. The chattering teeth. I did like anytime you tried to use the chattering teeth on something that was wrong, they would say, that's not a good way to use perfectly good chattering teeth.
Did you find the use for the fake barf?
Yes.
Yeah, you can use it for the Tentacle Doctor, right?
Oh,
or like
shit.
to prove
Yeah,
Laverne's sick.
right.
Oh no, you use it when you're trying to
Yes,
compete in the
you're
human
right,
contest.
you're right.
When you have the mummy, one of the humans who is a high ranker in the human contest is an issue, and you need to get him removed from the contest. So you say that he's sick, and then you throw fake barf on the ground. And then the doctor comes and says, look, human, clearly you're sick. There's vomit on the floor. We need to get you out of here. You're going to infect the other humans.
You're right.
Gotcha.
Yeah, you basically use it to Nancy Kerrigan, the best human.
He's not really the best.
Well, all of the humans are bootlickers in the future.
Sure. I mean, these tentacles have arms. What were we going to do?
They do have arms.
We were bringing a knife to a gunfight. So like, when I was playing this game, I started to like ask myself, like, it doesn't seem like there are as many point and click adventures. Like, they seem to have had their heyday, and my first thought was just like, okay, like, this is a style of game you can build without that much tech. Like, it creates a lot more, like, you need a lot, like, higher specs to build, like, an action game. I would imagine. I have no idea, really.
Depends on the game. But
over a point and click. And that was just my question, right? Like, okay, these had their heyday in, like, the early 90s. Like, I remember playing, Putt Putt and Fatty Bear, like Freddy Fish, like these instructional.
Same development team.
Yeah,
It's
cool.
all the same house.
Or some of the same developers, I should say. Ron Gilbert was integral in all of
So then what is, like, the issue that just, like, these people moved on? Or is there something about the zeitgeist that we no longer support point and click adventure games?
Well, like Kentucky Route Zero.
That's a good
most
point.
Recent example.
It's just, I wouldn't even think of that as like a point and click. I mean, now that you say it, it makes perfect sense. But they just seem different.
I think that there's a few different reasons here. One, point and click adventure games during their heyday, they were some of them were very technically impressive because they had these static screens that you could just put a lot of effort into the animations and the personality of these handful of static screens. And they just looked a lot more impressive than other games at the time. Because they were so concentrated and so specific in their locations. Like, Myst would not work as a 3-dimensional game. But at the time, because they could pre-render each of the scenes and there were only a handful of interactions you could do with any given object, they just looked far and away better than other games. At this point, an adventure game, a point-and-click adventure, would look as good or worse than other games. So you can't get away with technical flair. They also were showcases for writing in a time period when writing was heavily de-emphasized in games. So you could have all these nice witty jokes, these cool interactions, because they were operating with a tool set that other games ordinarily didn't even try to test. Like the scum engine and all of those verbs, like games didn't really think of having different ways to interact with objects oftentimes. Like things were weapons.
Mm-hmm.
The objects you had were weapons. You used them to kill enemies. Like that was by and large what you were doing at that time. So these games just stood out. They were very distinct. But now you've got action games, action-adventure games, shooters even, that use similar concepts in novel ways. And so you don't need a game where that's the hook. And then I think as well, like just pointing and clicking, like the mouse was novel at the time when point-and-click adventures were out. Like that mode of control was kind of unique unto itself, and that's not the case anymore.
No, mice are boring.
Pointing and clicking around a static screen. Yeah. Like pointing and clicking around a static screen is not as fun.
Do they make... I've never seen a console point and click. Do they exist?
They really drastically changed the UI generally. Like they release... Like you can play Day of the Tentacle on a PS4 right now. You can play Monkey Island on an Xbox 360. They mostly just make the scroll handled by an analog stick, so you can make it work, but it's not as snappy.
Yeah, it wouldn't be as good.
Yeah, the last proper adventure game, like there are definitely companies that are making adventure games just all the time. Like Nancy Drew games keep coming out; those are point-and-click adventures.
Nancy Drew's still around?
Yeah, Nancy Drew's still around. Nancy Drew is still a threat. There's the Deponia games. They're just constantly coming out. They're point-and-click adventure games. Actually, Double Fine made an adventure game. It was Double Fine Adventure, and it eventually became Broken Age. They made Broken Age. It was a really good point-and-click adventure game in this style. Featured Jack Black and some other people who are Double Fine favorites.
You know what's funny? I looked up Broken Age just now, and it's like Broken Age, Grim Fandango, Night in the Woods, Day of the Tentacle. Just like related to Broken Age and Deponia. So there you go. It's the whole lineup. Walking Dead. That's what we got.
All those styles of games have kind of supplanted the point-and-click adventure, and even a game like Broken Age, which was made by the same people who developed this game, or some of the same key figures, that was kickstarted. It was a smaller scope, and the genre hasn't really been revived out of it. I think that this genre, a lot of the good elements have been subsumed by more conventional gameplay designs, and a lot of the bad elements have just kind of been left in the dust. Like, each of us needed to use a guide at some point in this game to have an enjoyable experience with it. And if you were just kind of, you got one game a month or every few months or one game a year, you'll try all the items on all the things, and you'll figure out what all the solutions are to these puzzles. But some of these puzzles just don't make a ton of sense outside of this given circumstances.
No, I don't. Yeah, this does seem like a genre that, like, it's never really gonna... I mean, I shouldn't say never. I mean, time's long and cyclical. But it doesn't seem like there's going to be a revival of point-and-click adventures. Like, there's nostalgia for other sorts of games. I mean, like, shit, people still play Tetris all the time. But I don't, like, see this one coming back around. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and especially because this game and a lot of the old school point-and-click adventure games kind of took inspiration from Looney Tunes and kind of fantasy logic like that. At least the LucasArts games did. They were mostly like Saturday morning cartoons, but games. And even the nature of Saturday morning cartoons have changed.
That's true.
In a lot of ways.
Even like Looney Tunes, like if you watch some of their newer stuff, it's a lot different than it used to be.
Yeah, I'm still looking at the achievement page, and one of them is, oh right, I'm playing a cartoon. And it's for making the cat into a skunk using paint.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
A vintage Pepe Le Pew move.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you need to make the cat into a skunk. There's the exploding cigar. You need to give George Washington his chattering teeth. So yeah, I think that this game, like, it draws inspiration from a very specific time period, and that lends itself to a lot of the puzzles that are available. Like, having novel and comedic combinations of items adds to the difficulty, and I don't think that you would want to necessarily regulate difficulty that way going forward. Like, you want everything to be intelligible based on the objects and their real-world properties for the most part, or things that the game communicates to you. But some of these jokes require you to just make leaps of logic.
Yeah.
And I don't think that that's necessarily the best source of...
Yeah, there's no real, like, learning curve here. Like, it's not as if you get, like, better as the game progresses. I mean, maybe you sort of tune into the internal logic, but it's more just like, okay, let's see what happens this time around. Speaking of cartoons, too, has there been, like, a critical reappraisal of Pepe Le Pew? Like, has anybody... Could you do Pepe Le Pew now? Is it still funny? Was it ever funny? I don't know. Thoughts?
I don't think Pepe Le Pew ever was a cool dude. I think him sexually harassing that cat as the running joke of his existence. I don't know if it's no Speedy Gonzales, but it's not great.
There are a lot of dark chapters in the Looney Tunes history.
Oh yeah.
There are several entire characters who, if you even say their name out loud, you're like, fuck. I don't think Foghorn Leghorn holds up super well.
He is like, all right, look, he doesn't, but it is really fun to talk like Foghorn Leghorn.
It is. I mean, a bunch of characters in the Looney Tunes canon are basically just racial and ethnic stereotypes.
Yeah, fair.
But animals.
One of the, like, most famous, like, Looney Tunes I mean, we don't want to turn this into a Looney Tunes podcast, but one of the most famous episodes. All right, fair enough. One of the most famous episodes ever is basically Daffy Duck killing himself on stage.
Yep.
Like, he drinks poison, and then, like, the punchline of the entire episode is Bugs was like, "Wow, Daffy, that was incredible," and he's like, "Yep, but I can only do it once."
Yep. Yeah, that one's great. I mean,
we got a little bit of that as well in this. The Dwayne, the creator of novelty items.
Oh yes.
Yeah, when you meet him, he is very depressed. It's kind of graphic. He, like, has a pop gun and he, like, shoots himself in the head, but then it just, like, is a flag that goes through his head.
It just says bang.
Yeah, which kind of doesn't hold up to the test of time a little bit. We're a little bit more sensitive about that now.
No. It's not a great look.
Now, most of the game does not fall into those traps, but that one I was like, you.
Yeah, and that was definitely the one that stood out to me as being not great. But I thought the rest of it was held up pretty well. Like, as long as you were down for Looney Tunes type stuff, you know, if you were looking for exactly that type sense of humor, it delivered that. Mm-hmm. And I did enjoy the end of the game. After you power the two chronogons in the past and the future, and you get a large diamond to power the time machine in the present, so that you can actually fix the past, all the characters get reunited, and then you try to actually go one day into the past. But Purple Tentacle has taken 2 of the time-traveling devices, so you only have 1 left, and all of the characters pile into it, and they get fused into one horrifying monster.
This was a good joke.
Dr. Fred's like, you can't all go in the same one. Have any of you seen The Fly?
Yeah.
And that, you know, you are an abomination for part of a level. There's only one puzzle, really, 1 or 2 puzzles after you get fused. But I enjoyed wandering around with these 3 combined.
I was gonna say, I liked the punchline at the end too, where the doctor comes up and like, "Doctor, you need to separate us. You need to save us." And he slides over the X-ray machine. He's like, "You guys aren't fused. You're all just stuck in the same sweater."
Yeah.
You idiots are just all trapped in the same set of clothes.
That was probably my favorite joke in the whole game.
Yeah, I enjoyed that. I was like, oh no, I hope they end up stuck together. He's like, there's nothing science can do for you now. But no. Yeah, so I think Day of the Tentacle held up for what I expected it to be. It's not as good as some of the other classic adventure games I've gone back and played. Like Grim Fandango, I think holds up as just like a tour de force. That's a game we should eventually play at some point. But this game as just kind of a fun little cartoon experience, it's solid. And the puzzles, like a handful of them, really funny stuff. It's annoying in spots, like some of the logic I think you want a guide for. But holds up. Like, it's not completely archaic. And you can play Maniac Mansion in Maniac Mansion Day of the Tentacle. The whole game is available on Weird Ed's computer.
Yeah, it's 2 games for the price of 1. Like, you really can't afford not to play this game.
That's true. Since you played with the developer commentary, was there any commentary that really stood out to you? Like anything that added, or is it mostly just, here's the puzzle, here's how we came up with it?
They actually don't do a lot of that. They mostly are talking about like the process. So they have like artists and people who worked on the music. I think they had some animators, and a lot of them are like, this was the first project that I worked on out of college, and I was working with like huge names in the industry. It's kind of fun just to see what they talk about. A lot of them discuss like what it was like working with the technology that they were using at the time. There's one that comes up where they talk about like they were using MIDI files and it had to be under 32 bytes, something infinitesimally small, because it had to go on a floppy disk. You know, you couldn't have full scores, so they would go back in and like chop up the music. It's stuff like that. They were like, how did we even write the music? And they were like, well, we had like a demo copy of the game, basically, and then we played through and went back and added in the score later. It's just like stuff like that where it really shows the process of like the development. The artist also has a lot of good input. He's like, I would scan in these images that were these beautiful, like, I don't know if you looked at the, you can get the concept art. Did you take a look in there at all?
No.
Yeah, you can see like all the designs that he did, and it's like really nice. Like, I think he was using like Copic markers or something. And then he scanned them in, and then he had to just pick one color for the whole thing because they didn't have access to a full range of color.
Jesus.
Yeah. So it's interesting, like, what they went through. I would definitely suggest if you poke around with the developer's commentary, it's not too invasive. Sometimes it, like, pops up at the start of a scene and then you miss some dialogue, but how important is the dialogue anyway?
I mean, if it's the car wash dialogue, super important, but all the others, not so much.
That only comes up once you actually do the puzzle, and then they're like, all right, whose idea was this puzzle? Can you defend your choices?
And they were like, nope.
They were like, I thought it was like common knowledge. It was like a thing. If you went out and washed your car, of course it would rain. And they were like, I think that didn't test very well with our overseas audience. Something to that effect. They're funny.
Yeah, I mean, like, that's the thing. A lot of the puzzles in this game work on common knowledge. And that's kind of what adventure games got away with, was piggybacking on top of common knowledge to make logic puzzles. That way you didn't have to build an entire world and explain a bunch of lore about why these items would fit together. You can just intuitively combine these objects just based on their real-world properties. And every time they veer away from the real-world properties, it just leads to a lot of really big frustration.
Mm-hmm.
And if, you know, like the wine into vinegar thing is not common knowledge for you, then the puzzle just doesn't make sense. Where do I get vinegar from? For me, like someone who's had wine go bad before, I'm like, right. Wine plus time equals vinegar. But yeah, like every time they hit, it feels like magic, and every time they miss, it feels like why what am I even doing? How was I even supposed to figure that out?
Mm-hmm. It is not the most notorious adventure game puzzle. I'm gonna see if I can find it.
Chicken with a pulley in the middle.
Yeah. Adventure game puzzle notorious. There's one that's terribly the Babelfish from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. It toes the line between fun frustration and pure seething evil. I think there's a bunch in King's Quest as well, where It's just like, why would you ever design this even?
There's a bunch in King's Quest that, like, if you use the item early, you can't beat the game.
Yeah.
It seemed like the whole point of King's Quest was to just, like, be mean-spirited at a certain point.
Pretty much.
Those games hated that you wanted to play them.
Yeah. You're like, how dare you?
And Pete, when you were mentioning point-and-click adventure games, we actually played one, Still There, pretty recently.
Yeah.
Oh, shit, yeah.
We played in January.
I picked that game.
You picked that point-and-click adventure game.
I've already shunted it out of my brain.
Game of the year coming up.
Really stuck with you.
Well, with that, I think that's all I had for Day of the Tentacle. Enjoyed it. It was nice to finally have that checked off of my list. Pete, now it's your turn to pick.
Yeah, I think we're back around to me. So I'm gonna pick a game I don't know too much about, but I hear it's very funny and it has a very sort of interesting style. So we're gonna see if it's actually funny or if it's reprehensible humor. Hopefully it's the former. But
is it Day of the Tentacle? Because that seems to fit.
It is not Day of the Tentacle, but yeah, that description would fit. No, my game is going to be West of Loathing.
Oh.
It's a Steam game. It has good reviews. Like I said, most people note the humor, and it has like this sort of weird hand-drawn stick figure animating style. So I think it might be interesting to check out.
I have seen this before, yes. This will be fun, yes.
Yeah, I think it'll work.
Excellent. Well, just a reminder, you can get in touch with the show at DeepListensPod on Twitter, deeplistens@libsyn.com. We've got our comment sections and deeplistenspodcast@gmail.com. If you want to send it in, your emails, and you can also support us, patreon.com/deeplistens, and get access to our Discord. Thank you, Pete.
Yep. And this is a game I enjoyed. Point and clicks are kind of a niche taste, I would say, but if you fall in that niche, this is definitely one worth checking out.
Thank you, Em.
Thank you for checking off another one from my Steam library I didn't even know I had. I would like to add, if you are having trouble with some of these puzzles, I found sleeping on them was especially helpful in decoding some of their logic. We play these games very quickly, but if you take a break, I found I had the most luck. At night at like 4 a.m., I would be like, wait, if I put the wine in the time capsule, that'll make vinegar.
Yeah, sleep on it. Give yourself time. Your brain is working even when you don't think it is.
Exactly.
I gotta say, I like that West of Loathing on Steam, it has a DLC, The Reckoning at Gun Manor.
Yep.
That's a really good name.
Yeah, where you going?
Are we playing the DLC as well?
No. I'm just pointing out that this DLC exists.
That's your call, Em, if you want to dive in.
You know what? I think we'll DLC about it. Bye, everyone.
Thank you for coming to our last episode, everybody. We hope you enjoyed it.
It's been a long run. Good long run. 4 or 5 long years, and that was the end of it. DLC you next time, everyone.